So our topic today is fascinating. It says, ego, friend or foe. And as Brahmachari Rina Prisha pointed out, this is an auspicious weekend for teachers and education for life. We have the special day coming up, the National Day in India tomorrow, which is, it's a testimony to the Indian people that they would pick a day for teachers, which is wonderful to honor that. And it's also the anniversary for Education for Life, the 50th anniversary. So to approach the topic from that angle, I think it could be really interesting for people because it's an angle that I don't know that gets brought up in other contexts. So Prisha referred to the beginning conversations I had with Swami many years ago about what is this, how to live school. We didn't have the term education for life at that point. We still used how to live. And he basically didn't answer me, but he said, the most important thing right now is to develop your intuition. If this thing is going to work at all, it's going to take intuition on your part. So he didn't put it into words that way, but that was the message. But he did give me access to his library, which I appreciated. And in his library, he had collected, almost all the things that Master had ever written. And so I got to go over to his house at different times and sort through all those files and things. And one of the things I came across was a little booklet called The Psychological Chart. And the ideas in there became the core of Education for Life going forward. And we'll look at it from a couple of perspectives in this today's talk. So in terms of this ego idea, what we have in Education for Life, we saw something called progressive development. It's actually the core dimension of Education for Life. And when we talk about in these terms, okay, we have progressive development. We want to see the children growing along this spectrum. When you look more deeply, it's an incredibly profound dimension. And actually what we're really doing is we're training saints. We're cultivating children to move towards sainthood. And the sainthood has a definite definition that's can be helpful. So when many of you are familiar with these stages, or for those of you who aren't, there's 4 stages of growth along this progressive development spectrum. The first one is heavy. The second one is ego-active, contractive. The third stage is ego-active, expansive, and the fourth stage is light. Sounds doable so far. We move from heavy to light. But we go through this stage of ego-active, and that's where this topic today is so fascinating, ego, friend or foe. Because at a certain point along this path that we've all traveled, it's the universal path that every soul has to go through. At first, our consciousness is heavy. There's no motivation. It's just very lethargic, tamasic. And it don't want us to do the least possible amount of work. It wants to just basically kind of snuggle up in a corner and make sure it has enough food and sleep a lot. There's not a lot of ego at that point. It's very much like an animal. Just all about physiological needs. So at that point, the ego would be a friend because the ego is going to activate this mass of inert energy. It's going to set a match to it. And how does that happen? Well, it happens through desires. You're over there in the corner hiding, and then all of a sudden you see somebody eating something that looks that might be interesting. That might be tasty. I would like that pizza. I would like that pasta or that that Indian dish. And it motivates the person to try to figure out, how can I get that food? Or maybe they're looking out and they see somebody with a fancy car. They say, oh, wow, I'd really like to have a car. I'd like to have a car like that. And so the ego is waking up. It's forming itself around desires, or as Swami puts it, it's forming around self-definitions. I'm a person that likes fast cars. I'm a person that likes good food. I am all these different things that can fit into this definition. So we go to the second stage, ego active contractive, where the ego basically kind of goes wild at this point. It just starts to realize that I can have all kinds of things. I just have to put out energy, and I can have this and I can have that. And if I get more money, I'll do this. And just kind of runs roughshod over life and creates a lot of chaos. If everybody on the planet was tamasic, we probably wouldn't have this. We wouldn't have the same kind of problems. We would just, because there wouldn't be people doing things. They'd all just be kind of lethargic and just kind of stuck. So for teachers, this is the stage that's very, very challenging, because you have these kids who just have all this energy and all this willpower, but no sense of expansion. It's all about them. It's all about what they want to do, and they basically break all the rules and they cause havoc in the classroom, and teachers get white hair. But it's a big step up from that heavy stage. And where there's energy, you can start to work with it. And so it's interesting, I thought I'd bring this part in too. So when a teacher is working with a child at this level of consciousness, what they use is rewards to try to shape the child's energy in a positive direction. The child on his own doesn't have any discrimination yet, just has a bunch of desires. So if the teacher can shape the environment so that he can manifest those desires, if he acts in certain ways that hopefully the teacher is wise, are more expansive. They're like, okay, if you can be kind to your friends, you can have more of something that's meaningful to that child. He really doesn't want to be kind to the friends, but he will be kind to the friends if you give him extra pizza or something afterwards. And so you're just kind of priming the pump. You're getting the child to behave in a more expansive way, even though they don't understand why they're doing it or want to do it and wouldn't do it unless they had a reward to be in that way. So it's kind of starting to shape the ego. So it's the teacher comes in to try to shape the ego. Of course, Divine Mother works with us in the same way. She just does it more, less personally. And if we really watch our lives, we can see these same kind of behaviors happening for us. But at some point, the ego starts to mature, starts to move into realizing that, these behaviors that I've been kind of tricked into doing, I actually kind of like it, because when I'm kind to people, they're kind back, and I kind of like having people be kind to me. And if I share my toys with people, they share their toys, and I like to have access to more of that. So this ego is starting to move forward into this second stage, the ego active, expansive stage. And at this point, the teacher's job, or Divine Mother's job, shifts. Instead of focusing so much on rewards for the action, now this child is starting to have their own motivation for doing these more expansive behaviors. So we want to back off on the rewards, and we want to shift their focus, but we want to shift it in a particular way. We want to start them to become aware of their feelings more, aware of how do they feel when they're kind, how do they feel when they tell the truth, how do they feel when they show courage, all these different positive qualities, and awaken in them this awareness, this inner awareness of, we would, another Swami would call it natural law, but this stuff really works when you life works better when I tell the truth. Life works better when when I'm kind. And so it becomes, that energy starts to grow, because now there's the inner motivation that's being awakened. And that inner motivation has to keep expanding, keep growing. I mean, there can be, we can slip back for a while, but inevitably it has to move forward and embrace it. So we get to the borderline here between ego active, expansive, and light. And again, this is where you start to realize that what we're working with is not something very mundane and small. It's huge, because at this point, the soul is capable, it has developed this inner awareness, and it starts to be capable of moving beyond the ego, starting to see that, when I do things for myself, it's just not as enjoyable as doing things for a higher purpose. And it's a long journey. This does not happen overnight, of course. It takes many attempts, many lessons, slipping back, forgetting, not realizing that we're working from ego. But it's pretty much the space where almost everybody connected with Ananda is at. You wouldn't come to be part of the Sangha if you weren't ego active, expansive. You wouldn't even be looking for something like that. You'd be looking for something that would make more money. Rather than spending your time listening to a talk like this, you'd be out there working your business, trying to find more customers. So the fact that you're part of Ananda Sangha, almost, I can't think of anybody I've met in all these years that wasn't ego active, expansive, mostly. Lots of individual flaws, things that weren't perfected, but overall the consciousness was of this stage. Learning that acting for a higher purpose actually is more rewarding than for a more personal purpose. I thought I would, before we go into the final stage, the light stage, I wanted to just read you a few things. This is taken from that first article that I found of Masters, the psychological chart. It's available at the Education for Life website. It's called edforlife.org. And if you look on there under resources, you'll see psychological chart. The psychological chart is actually, 25 pages or so. It's pretty comprehensive. It's the last 2 pages where this is drawn from, where Master does something amazing. He gives us a map of consciousness, basically. And he puts it in terms of adjectives. Of what kind of adjectives describe these different levels of consciousness? So first I'll read a couple from Ego Active Expansive. So this is what he said. Ambitious, controlling and guiding others. Dutifulness out of hope of reward. You see, this is the bottom of the ego active expansive. We're just coming over that borderline from contractive to expansive, but starting to move ahead. And moving up a little bit more, says, dutiful in relation to oneself or one's relations only. So it's a very narrow field of motivation so far. But love for parents, love for relations, love for friends, love for people who do good things for me. Argumentative but respectful, and an interesting one, repentant. Starting to have a little feeling of when they do something wrong, that they're something to feel sorry about. Before this, they don't have that. At the lower state of consciousness, there is no repentance. So because there's no awareness. Then moving up a little bit further, still ego active, expansive, but getting close to the top here. Having fortitude, inquisitive, tenacious, fearless, active sympathy. So less ego, quite a bit less ego, but good qualities, emphasizing good qualities, but probably with attachment. I am inquisitive, I am tenacious, I am fearless, and being tied into it. But now we move in over we move up into this light, less upper state, light state of consciousness. And you start to see this lighter consciousness, this purified awareness starting to come into play. Dutifulness out of love, out of respect. So before it was dutifulness first for hope of reward, and then in relation to oneself or one's relations only. But now it's purified up to the point of dutifulness out of love, out of respect. No sense of reward, outer reward. Moral reason, have a sense of ought. That inner compass has been awakened. So now there's a sense of what's the right thing to do from inside, not from listening to a bunch of rules outwardly, but from inside, knowing that, oh, these things, they feel right to me. And we may not be able to act on them all the time, but at least we're developing that sense. Acting in accordance with the suggestion of superior minds. Being willing to let somebody else wiser than you give you advice and listen to it. That's not ego active. That's moving more into the light stage. Love for great people, love toward animals. Interesting. Animals, they don't really give us help except they give us companionship and stuff. But loving animals is a pretty selfless endeavor. Going up a little higher, having a reforming spirit, forgiving, love for good qualities. And then here up at the top, love of bliss and calmness, impartial, contented. This is a wonderful quality, contented. Just being with the present time, being content. Truthfulness, spontaneous, irrespective of consequences. Reverence for divine subjects. So it gives you a very practical set of guidelines to work with for ourselves, or if we're in a situation where we're working with others, to look for this. And having a sense for when this soul is ready to move from ego active light to light. There's a timing involved. I watched Swami work with people over the years, including myself. And in the beginning, he usually was quite, what's the word? Complimentary. He would compliment you for doing a good job. Wow, you did a good job in developing the schools, or somebody did a good job of figuring out how to run the village or something like that. But at one point, in almost every case, at some point, he got much less personal, and he would stop commenting on how you did a good job. And it would subtly switch. The commentary would switch so that the ego wasn't pampering your ego anymore, because you didn't need that. And it was painful sometimes to people who are used to that. They're used to getting all these wonderful compliments, and all of a sudden there are no compliments coming anymore. But if we're going to get beyond the ego, we've got to go beyond that. And sometimes it's not very pretty. Sometimes, it says in the autobiography that Sri Yukteswar helped master through that phase, at least modeling it for us. And it was like pulling teeth. It was like yanking these teeth out of your jaw, because the ego, it's pretty well implanted by that time. We've been kind of living in this ego world for probably many lifetimes to get to this point. We've got a lot of identity with it, and it's hard to let go of it. It's hard to let go of it. But that's the role of a good teacher. It's the role of Divine Mother for us, to give us those experiences that will pull us out of it. So to go back to the teacher modality, you do have students that get to that point. I've had, not a lot, but I'd say I've had maybe, 30 or 40 over the years of children that I thought really did. They had this potential for light consciousness. And my job was to figure out how to cultivate it with them. What could I do to help them? And one of the things I did find was this whole idea of playing down the personality, playing down the ego. I'll give you an example. This came from one of the online training classes. So I was talking to this lady when she was an Italian, and she had this little girl who was about 4 years old, and she said, "My daughter has light consciousness." She said, "I just see it. I'm kind of awed by it, but she has it a lot of the time." And I was saying, well, let's work with her. So instead of when she does something good, instead of complimenting her and saying, "Oh, you did such a good job," and says, let's just focus on the reality. So there was one day that they were cleaning the house for the dad was going to come home. And so the mom and the daughter were cleaning the house together. And they both worked really hard. And the mom was kind of wondering how to respond to this. And when the dad came home, the daughter just took it forward and says, "Dad, look at how wonderful the house looks." She didn't say, "Mom and I worked really hard." She just said, look at what happened. And it was completely impersonal. It was completely not taking any credit for it, anything like that. And sometimes we have to learn from the kids, because the kids are showing this consciousness that we're still aspiring to. But so the teacher's job then is to shift and to simply focus more on the what happened rather than who did it, taking the who out of it and just moving into that state. And it can be wonderful. You may have had an experience like that where you did something and something good, and somebody complimented you for it, and you felt a little funny. You felt like, oh, it's like your consciousness got pulled down because all of a sudden you're being complimented, and you didn't do it for a compliment, but it just kind of that's part of that transition that we're going through in this stage. So at this point, going back to our title, the ego is a foe, or at least it's a launching pad that we're trying to move beyond, because this experience of lightness is so attractive. It's so magnetic. And the more we taste of it, the more we are, at some point, Master said, we become bliss alcoholics. That we just want that all the time. We're always sipping at it. And it just draws us. It just draws us stronger and stronger into the light. So it is a journey, and we're all involved in it, and we can support each other in this in different ways that will come up for us. But it helps to kind of understand it in some of these terms that Master gives us. It's not something, sainthood is not something that's way off there. Sainthood is something we should all be aspiring to, because sainthood is simply learning to live in the light and to step beyond ego consciousness. And no matter what we're doing in life, I mean, we're all doing what we're supposed to be doing. So we're all in the right place for ourselves. But in that is the potential to be able to do what we're doing in a light consciousness rather than an ego consciousness, and to become aware of that and to appreciate feedback that comes to us. That feedback will come to us. For me, sometimes it came through Swami Kriyananda, because he was playing that role for me. But I also found it coming to me through my Guru Bhais, sometimes consciously, sometimes not consciously. But if I was looking for it, I could see, oh, thank you. Thank you for saying things that way or responding that way. So the more we live in that consciousness, the more we can help each other to grow as a Sangha, also individually that way.